My name is Owen Rogers. I'm a liaison specialist at the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, and today I'm joined with the playwright and the director of War Words. Welcome to the Library of Congress, and would you please introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Owen. I'm Michelle Kholos Brooks, and I'm the playwright of War Words.
It's so great to be here. My name is Sarah Norris, and I'm the director of War Words.
Thank you so much again for joining us, and I need to ask, how long have you all known each other?
It feels like forever,
It does feel
but
like
also only a little bit ago. I would say we started working together 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think about 8 years ago now. We were actually thrown together. We didn't know each other for a production. I had a play, and the producing company chose Sarah as the director, and we met and fell in love, and the rest is history.
So, what was the first project you worked on? I know you mentioned it was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a play called Hitler's Tasters.
Okay.
Great title, catchy title. And it's a play about the women that tasted Hitler's food for poison. And it's a wild script where the women have cell phones, where they reference events that you would recognize in the news today. And it's a dark comedy. You think World War II, you think dark, heavy, but Michelle found a really great way to make it something audiences can lean in, laugh, and I think it makes it more powerful at the end.
Right, I hear that title and just absurdity unfolds.
Yes.
So, you take that World War II setting, and now let's advance that up to the play that we're all going to see tomorrow. How did y'all first get interested in veterans' stories?
Well, for me, it's a kind of long roundabout story, but I didn't know anybody in the military. The closest connection I have is that my father-in-law was in World War II. And so at some point it was brought to my attention that I think of myself as this very progressive, open person who accepts everybody for who they are. But at some point I realized I had very clear ideas about who I thought people in the military were. And so I had this idea to kind of set about and interview people who had served during the Long War, Iraq and Afghanistan, to get their personal stories, to try to create a bridge between people like me who have no connection to the military, to people who serve, to try to bridge that gap a little bit. And I was really fortunate to meet a guy named Steve Grunman, who is with the Atlantic Council, who the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, who are very interested in this kind of thing, creating, translating national security issues to common everyday people. And I believed that a real powerful way of doing that was through the arts. So we were able to connect and jump in and try to do this thing. And then, of course, Sarah's always my preferred director to work with, and she came on board.
Now, the question that's just itching in the back of my mind is, how do you communicate veteran stories to your predominantly non-veteran audience? And then, of course, what is their reaction?
Well, I think for me it was starting with the cast, because they're the storytellers. And what was really wonderful about the cast we assembled for War Words is they care so much and really went above and beyond what I'm used to in working on a theatrical play. They were doing research, they were reading books, articles, videos. They would come in with stories I had never heard. I mean, they really wanted to get it right. And I think that attention to detail translated to an audience, because they just embodied veterans. They embodied people. I mean, they're people ultimately that have these really heroic stories, but also really human stories. Really, some of the stories in the play are so simple and relatable. And I feel like the work they put in to try to honor the stories and get it right just really translated, and audiences were quite moved. And I also think Michelle did a beautiful job of taking all of these stories and finding a way to weave them all together and make them connect, and it just creates for really powerful theater.
I would also say that it was really important to me in first conceiving of this to, we all know people that have wonderful stories, right? But not everybody is a great storyteller, and not everybody knows how to deliver a story. And so I thought this was a great opportunity to take the stories, to be able to curate them, and then to have a wonderful director and wonderful actors be able to interpret them, is a way to get an audience more emotionally involved.
Absolutely. And as an archive of veterans' firsthand stories, that this commitment to authenticity is deeply meaningful, and it also has so many questions about the research process, because that is something that, as the Veterans History Project has gone out and worked with people to collect veteran stories, we are as equally invested in people coming here and listening to them and researching them and adapting them. I'm so curious about the research process. Like, how did you find these veterans to interview? It sounds like you really had to go outside your network.
I did, but it's amazing that it wasn't that far beyond my network, as it turned out. So I just threw a very wide net. I just spoke to everybody I could. If I saw on Facebook that somebody's nephew had just signed up for the military, okay, I would say, hey, do you think your nephew would talk to me? And then oftentimes I would speak with one, I would speak with one member, and they would recommend somebody else. I just sort of talked to anybody and everybody that I could, and it was, I was surprised by how many people were willing to talk.
What surprised you most about veteran stories?
There were a lot of surprises. I think in some ways, coming from where I was, I'm not sure that I really understood what patriotism was. I sort of thought of it in some ways, not consciously, but as a little bit of a hokey idea, and I attribute it to people who wrap themselves in the flag and kind of make a big stink about it and say you're sort of with us or not. And I met people who really sincerely believed in service and believed in patriotism. And I didn't know anybody like that. They were authentic, and they really translated to me how important it was for them not just to enter service, but to continue to serve out in society in one way or another. And I also was under the impression that people mostly joined the military because they had no other option. And the enormous variety of reasons that people joined was a great surprise to me.
Can I add something
Of
into
course.
that too? This is a great answer, but I'd like to just say that I was surprised by how funny these veterans are. I guess I thought of the military as very serious and very, you can't laugh. You have to be it's life or death, but it's all about laughter and just learning from, we had 2 veterans in the cast, and they needed the laughter in order to survive. And I feel like they brought more fun to the rehearsal process. All of the other actors, we have to be very serious. We have to be very respectable of all of these stories, and they said, no, you got to laugh, you got to have fun, because that's the way you survive and get through. And so that really stuck with me, this idea that they need to laugh in order to survive. And
I agree. And when we were advertising this show, I believe both of you pulled me back when you're like, no, and yes, get it out there. Let them know that it is serious. Let them know that it is intense, but also remind them that it's funny. Yeah. It's a human play about human beings. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you incorporated that into the work. I remember my first veterans oral history. Do you remember yours?
I do.
Okay. It's, what did you learn in the process, or how did you prepare for it?
I stumbled into it a little stupidly, actually. I didn't know what to expect. I was very intimidated. The gentleman that I was interviewing had been a colonel, and he said, let's meet at a restaurant. And so, I did a little bit of a pre-interview with him just to generally get a sense of what we would be talking about. But I just decided this is so far out of my scope of understanding that I'm just going to jump in with curiosity. So that's what I did, and I did prepare some questions, but it took so many turns that I didn't expect that I just had to sort of follow along. We sat and had nachos and just talked.
There's so many times when we do go out into the field and share the project at events where there's that downtime, in airports and long car rides. And you reminded me of a time where I shared a bowl of nachos with a Medal of Honor recipient and just listened to stories, and it was just I should have a recorder running right now, but it was also just important to be human beings.
And to be heard a little bit. And I would say Michelle's a really good listener. And it feels like that's what these men and women wanted. They wanted someone to listen to their story, and that their story counts, that their story might mean something. You mentioned a few times that a lot of the veterans said, who wants to hear our story? The story doesn't matter. The story... But we do. We all want to hear. Audiences show up to this play because they want to hear these stories. They're important.
I will say that that a number of them did say to me, Michelle, it's really nice that you're doing this, but nobody cares. And I have been very gratified to prove them wrong, because we have found that again and again, audiences care a lot.
Absolutely, and that affirmation is part of the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. And just this idea, even just if you take a step backwards, look at the discipline of oral history, setting aside intentional time, to ask somebody about their life and to record it for future generations. I'm just so curious, and I just want to say again how thankful I am that some of the war word storytellers are going to be joining the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. And just as you've taken stories from veterans who, are surprised that you want to hear them or not sure how they're going to be used, how would you like to see those stories used by future generations once they're here?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I'm thrilled that they're going to live on beyond the play, because, as many of them I spent maybe 2 hours with, and then, you can only let people sit in a theater for so long, right? So everything had to be culled quite a bit. So I hope that people will take the time to hear all those stories, and what I really hope is that we'll encourage people to realize that everybody has a story, that no matter what your impression of somebody is, especially a group is, once you start talking to individuals, there are always connections. You can always find connections. And so I hope that it encourages people to go forward and ask others to tell their stories, and to always go forward with curiosity. You know, in my deepest hippie heart, that's what I hope that this compels for people.
Wonderful. And I want to set the questions down, and I'd like to dive into the creative process, where, you know, just this with the collaboration of the two of you with the script and the execution of the script, how do you match actors to veterans' personalities? Like, what is the selection process like for being a war word storyteller?
Well, I think it was important for us to find actors that could really hold our attention and are comfortable just being still and letting the words and the language do the work. Well, sometimes actors really want to act. That's their job, and that's great when they do that. But we really wanted and focused on finding storytellers that could let the words settle into them. And again, going back to all the research that they did and all of the thoughtfulness that they put into the project, we wanted people that could live in these experiences. And so I think that's where we started from. And I mean, we found a great cast.
How have the interviewed veterans reacted to the play?
The ones who have seen the play have been, they seem delighted by it. As a matter of fact, 3 of them are going to be here at the event, and a couple of them were sad that they couldn't make it. Some of them, after I interviewed them, were done being involved. But a few of them have stayed in touch and have been advocates for the play, have promoted the play, and have come to do talkbacks. And they seem to be okay with it. So as you can imagine, the first time they saw a reading, I was terrified. But they're all, as usual, they lead with generosity and have put no expectations on anything. And I think they've been a little kind of astounded that it actually became something.
And what kind of feedback have you gotten from veterans who've seen the show?
I feel they're excited and want us to keep doing it, invite it, bring it places. Nothing but positive responses that I've been privy to. I know a theater upstate in New York, I don't even know if I told you this, Michelle, but did a reading with some veterans at a local center, and they were determined, when are we going to put this on? When are we going to do? It's so real, it's so true, and it was a cool experience working it through with actual veterans who just couldn't get over how truthful the play is, and it's because it's through the words of real people that have experienced these terrible situations, but are living and finding a way to keep moving forward. And I can't think of anything but positive feedback. The veterans that were in the project just wanted everyone that they knew to come see it. They were so proud of it. They were so proud of the work. And I think that goes back to the curation and the play itself, and how I think it's a great representation of these voices that you don't necessarily see in the theater.
One of the reasons why I went into oral history as opposed to being a documentarist is that I don't have to leave anything on the cutting room floor. I don't have to make those difficult decisions. What are some of the difficult curatorial decisions that you've had to make?
Well, exactly what you said, leaving so much on the floor, leaving so much in my computer, leaving so much unseen. I mean, the play could go on for days. It could go on for days. Not to mention the fact that I feel like I just scratched the surface with the amount of people that I interviewed. You know, there are just endless number of people that could be interviewed. So at a certain point, you have to say, as I started the curation process and the writing process, the plays tend to tell you what they need to be, and so I had to sort of follow that and come to a conclusion. But it's a constant source of frustration for me that I can't include all the delightful stories and all the heartbreaking stories. There's just never enough time, which is why I love what you're doing here, because there is the time. There is the time for the entirety of all these stories.
And I am affirmed to hear that, because the recordings that we'll have here at the library are the holistic recordings, and people will have the opportunity to come to the Library of Congress and get to know some of your storytellers a little bit better. Were there any lessons learned, in either the direction or the writing of War Words? I'm curious. It's almost like I'm asking you for the director's cut, I suppose. What are some things that worked? What are some things that didn't? What are some things that you tried and then was there anything that you had to retool?
Well, I'd like to think it all worked.
Yeah.
No, I learned, I learned about veteran stories, and I told Michelle I think the play was written for me. I mean, she went out to educate the general public that don't interact with military men, women, their families. I'm that person. So I learned a lot about veterans and what they experience when they're away from home, when they're back at home, and anything in between. I learned a lot about collaboration and teamwork. I feel like the actors, the designers, we had a movement person involved. Everybody wanted so badly to get this story right, and how everybody worked together, and it was a really special and unique experience that we would come in and do stretches together at top of day. We would tell stories and share our own experiences, and there was a strong bond that happened. And I think that's something I'd like to bring into my directing process moving forward. How can I create that love and team spirit, that it wasn't about any one individual actor or a designer that felt, oh, the play has to be about it was everybody really working together to try and honor the text. So hopefully that's something that I can carry with me on other projects moving forward.
And I'm so interested in the interaction between, you mentioned there are 2 veteran cast members, mm-hmm. and the rest of the cast, where there was this, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that moment where, the veterans on the cast told everybody else that, it's okay. It is okay to laugh. It is okay to tell a funny story. Were there any other interactions across those tribes that helped build a stronger play?
I definitely think our veterans became sort of leaders of the company. It was very ensemble driven and people taking care of each other, but they did set the tone. They set I think people were nervous coming into it or wanted to be careful around them, and right away they said, we're not fragile, just let's laugh, let's get down and dirty together. And they were really, they shared their stories with us. They the good, the bad, anywhere in between. And whenever we weren't sure about something, we'd check in. How do you salute correctly? How do you stand correctly? I mean, we wanted it to be very specific, and they would lead those exercises, and it was wonderful having them as part of the project. And they were brilliant. I mean, they were really good actors. I don't think you could tell who the veterans were, who the actors were. The audience always, we can't tell who's the veteran, who are the veterans, who are it was all seamless, and I think that goes back to the actors really trying to be specific and get it right, and our veterans being really good actors. I mean, they just created a perfect cast together.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go rogue a little bit, because now I'm thinking of interview questions that I hadn't thought of before. So we talked about the theory and the research of war words. I would love to hear a little bit more about the history of it. Can you tell me about your first opening night for the play?
Well, War Words had a few different readings and incarnations before it finally went officially to the stage without scripts and in a full production. I'll tell you a funny little story about the first reading that Sarah was also involved in, and that was that General Petraeus was invited to come. And it was at a fairly small theater, 100-seat theater in Los Angeles, and he was going to speak afterwards. And it was suggested to me that perhaps he should give notes about the authenticity of the play and how it was afterwards. And I said, "Are you kidding me? Absolutely not. I can't. I'm nervous enough as it is." And they said, "Well, he's a 4-star general." And I said, "Well, is he a theater critic?" But he very generously came to see the show, and during I don't know if you saw him, Sarah, but I was in the same row as him, and I couldn't concentrate on what was happening on the stage because he was taking notes. The whole time he was taking notes, and I'm sinking further and further down in my seat and just thinking, I just want to hide and die and make this go away. And then at the end of the show, he went up on stage, and he had been taking notes about all the things he loved about the show. At which point I burst into tears, partially just out of relief. But it was very gratifying. It was very validating, and again, quite generous. It was a reading with scripts, but Sarah and I put an awful lot into working it as we were going forward and making sure that we had not only that we were authentically representing, but that it was also entertaining. Right? That's the point of putting something on a stage. You want it to be entertaining. So it was a very fine balance. And I think as we've worked it along the way and then in rehearsals, I think it's really come to that. So it's been a gift to work on it for a while. It's rare, I think, to do that with a show, and the show really benefits from that.
I just want to say that on behalf of the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, thank you so much for bringing your show to us, for sharing it with the Library of Congress audience. And this won't come out for a bit, but the day before the show, I can't wait to see it. And again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.